Step into the Grand Tour. Step into the Grand Tour. Dragon Ball GT.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Sorry to jump scare you with Dragon Ball GT, but we're here to talk about a new SSR foreigner, Wandjina. If you don't know, this is Let's Talk FGO Wanted, so we'll talk about an FGO units, Fate Grand Order, real-life history and folklore, their fate lore, capital L, their mechanics, and more. And honestly, that's it. So let's end the intro zone and start the show. Alrighty, so Wandjina, which can also be anglicized Wandjina, no D, Wandjina, which is an O, or even Glingi to some peoples, refers to a type of spirits associated with clouds and rain in the collective mythology of the Warora people. There's 2 double R's there. Hopefully I'm putting enough R in there. Which is a group of Aboriginal Australians hailing from the modern Kimberley region in the northwest. The Warora people are part of the Wandjina Wungar cultural bloc, along with the Wunambal and... is it R? Indian? Ngarinin? Sorry, there's an I and IN back there, back to back. It's a little tough for me. But these groups of people have shared cultural ties through the dreaming religion and mythology, which includes subjects like the Wandjina, the Wungar, a local variant of the rainbow serpent spirit, and other cultural ties that aren't related to this video we're doing. The dreaming, or the dream time, sometimes rendered as everywhen, is a concept which is a little difficult to render into English without the cultural background, which I don't have. But probably the best way to describe it simply, at least to my reading, is that it refers to both a kind of achronal age of myths, the time and the place when legendary ancestors and great spirits did the things in folktales and myths and legends, but it also refers to something which is eternal and ever-present. The dreaming happened before you were born, it will continue after you die. So both a time when stuff happened in the before times, but also the kind of ever-presence unifying sense of time, the universe, and everything, if you follow me. So unlike Wungar, which is again a local variant on the rainbow serpent, whose name is rendered Yurlungur in another Aboriginal dialect, which is a version of the name you might remember from SMT, Wandjina are supposed to be more of a localized spirit, a class of beings who can be attached to places or to particular families or clans. According to some of the Dreamtime stories, the Wandjina created the landscape of the Kimberley region and its inhabitants. They continue to have influence over them. According to some of those communities, the Wandjina gave them their laws, culture, and language. And I say some because, again, this is a block of cultures where these sort of things are common, which are linked to certain geographic locations, but are also not completely unified. But yes, gave them their laws, culture, and language, and are said to have come from either the sky or the sea before arriving on the land. The Wandjina are strongly associated with cycles of fertility and regeneration, and especially rain, as mentioned before. The Kimberley region in Australia has a very strong monsoon season, and visual depictions of the Wandjina are said to have the dots on their bodies because that represents drops of rain. And they are said to punish those who break their laws with floods, thunderstorms, and cyclones. So, weather associations. Talk a little about their visual depiction. The Wandjina are a pretty common subject of Aboriginal cave paintings in the region. The earliest depictions of Wandjina cave art can be dated to around 4,000 years ago. Unfortunately, the plus or minus on the margin of error there is several hundred years. But this rough dating period would have coincided with a climactic shift ending a very long drought in the region, sometimes called a mega drought, which would have brought back in the current seasonal monsoons, funnily enough. These paintings use pigments usually of red, yellow, and black on a white background, and are said to have originally been made by the Wandjina themselves when they found their place of rest. As part of the Wandjina tradition, the local Aboriginal peoples repaint the paintings to regenerate them, to refresh their life poise, which keeps up the cycle of influence over the rain. Some of these paintings have been repainted so many times they have over 40 layers deep of pigment, though we can observe slight changes in the art style over time. There's a little bit of artistic drift there. The Wandjina arts are found in similar places but are stylistically distinct, let me enunciate, from another famous type of paintings seen in the region, known as the Guion. These are much older. I found there was quite a lot of debate in the exact dating. The most recent studies, as of 2020, place them as probably as old as 12,000 years ago, based on the more recent dating. And again, a bit a matter of debate, and there are simplified rock paintings which would predate even this style, which could be from as far back as 20,000 years. But it is believed that the stylistic drift, the difference between the Wandjina and the Guyan art pieces could be due to the fact that basically, remember the Mega Drought? I mentioned it literally like a minute ago. When the Mega Drought started is when the Guyan paintings, their style started to wane, and then many thousands of years, I think it was thousands, a long time later, sorry, that's me guessing without having put that actual fact in my note to write this transitional phase. But anyway, when the rains come back, then the Wandjina figures start to appear. The name Guyan can also be written more like Gyorn with a GY. That is associated with some myths of Wandjina. Basically, there are some tellings, some versions of the stories, where there was a great Wandjina, a big one, a singular creator who first made humans, who were the Gyorn people, but wasn't able to interact with them properly or specifically, and so went to the Milky Way, visible in the night sky, and there are certain attestations in other Dreamtime stories about basically the Milky Way for help. And the Great Wandjina came back with many more Wandjinas, which started the cycle of, cave paintings, rain, refreshment, etc. Now, Wandjina depictions are fairly popular in Australia still. There are several modern Aboriginal and recent history artists keeping up the tradition, not only in the refreshing of the cave paintings, but also in other formats, bark painting, which is very common as well in Aboriginal art, but also modern methods like acrylics and oils. There was a children's show in the 1960s called Wandjina, with an exclamation point. We probably don't need to talk about that one too much. It was the 60s. Better leave that where it lay. Now, there was a little incident you may have, in the 2000s where there were graffiti images of the Wandjina in the classical style appearing in Perth, Australia, Perth being outside of the Wandjina's traditional cultural home. This caused some reported offense or outrage from some Aboriginal communities. This included certain quotes that only specific artists are supposed to depict the Wandjina, but there wasn't ever a very clear framework for how these artists are supposed to be qualified. It's kind of like playing a game of telephone because it was in the realm of early Flickr and stuff. Apparently people were doing Wandjina watching tours to look for the graffiti signs, but it's also distant enough that it's hard to run down some of the sources on this. If you want me to editorialize a little, I'm obviously not going to say that the culture in which an artistic theme and the spiritual meaning behind that theme originated in don't have ownership and control over it. But also the Wandjina is from a block of linked peoples and cultures, which is not a monolithic singularity, which means that not all things are true all at the same time. Think just of your exact cultural differences between Christian denominations, for example. Everything doesn't line up all the time. So it could be that the complaints were referring specifically to the classical style of Wandjina painting, the ancient style being replicated on street graffiti. But since I'm making YouTube videos basically for free, we're monetized, but it's not like I draw a salary. I don't really have the budget to run it to Australia and ask for context for these comments that are 15 or 20 years old in some cases. So we'll just have to go with the fact that, like I said, there was a story about this, but there's enough of a telephone game that I can't really comment any further on it. If FGO's depiction has raised any actual criticism or concern, rather than just people being like, oh, isn't this a thing? I haven't heard about it. You let me know, comments. And of course, jumping into the Fate-specific lore, FGO's depiction is not a literal Wandjina from a cave painting, because of course it's a little weirder than that. For starters, I do want to throw out there that while Wandjina is said to look like a young woman, Wandjina as a servant is classified as genderless. There you have both the feminine and the pretty boy type of tags. Kind of makes sense because the Persian-shaped Wandjina is in its original form. When we were introduced to them in Servant Summer Festival, Wandjina was kind of a bodiless presence, a massive force which oversees humanity and has affection for them, but is fundamentally unable to be seen with or communicate with them. The physical form of a servant we see seems to be a result of that interaction in that event. We use a cave painting to communicate with the big Wandjina, and then they take the form of a servant. They kind of grasp the ability to take the servant container. Now, while there is something to be said about the vibes that can match Wandjina as an alien, and indeed, there is some of the usual Ancient Aliens bullshit in real life about Wandjinas. Forget it. Ditch it. FGO asserts that Wandjina is not an extraterrestrial, normally, anyway, but an embodiment of a natural force, aka an elemental. In dialogue, Wandjina describes fairies as their relatives, and the true ancestors, elementals of the earth, as their friends. The whole bodiless and imperceptible thing is much closer to Nasu's original lore on fairies and elementals. They're supposed to be outside of human perception and unable to interact with humans normally, but also that is really tricky with most of the way that, fairy lore works in Britain, especially Arthurian Britain. Now, Wandjina being such a embodiment of a critical aspect of life in nature as rain is called an immense being, which is more powerful than a normal elemental, and so called a great elemental or super elemental. Similar to a deity from the Age of Gods, but not quite the same. Mainly the reverence here seems to be that while Wandjinas are important, they're not exactly worshipped like gods, or at least if they were, it's kind of loosey-goosey. Despite liking humans so much, Wandjina is supposed to have been around since the Mesozoic era, which you may recall as the dinosaur one, and does have some distant or familiar dialogue with our LB7 type crew, some of the Central America guys, so I don't know if we meant anything by that. But wait, there's more. Wandjina has been embroiled in the Servant universe, so because of that crossover, it's probably Double X's fault. Wandjina was placed as the guardian entity not just of humans, but also of a total of 7 watery planets, which makes them a cosmic elemental, whatever that means. Servant universe, I don't gotta explain shit. Any other space-based elements of Wandjina's design can probably be attributed to a mage or some such, a certain person with fairy eyes, i.e. the ability to see fairies, who might have seen them once and thought of them like an alien descending from space. It's one of those things where, like, the literal translation of Nasu's notes are like, it's possible that, once upon a time, a certain person with a certain power saw something. Dude, be a little more resolute, man. Come on, you're killing me. Anyway, Wandjina's Noble Phantasm references Mamaragan, also known as Namarakan, who is an ancestral spirit who rides storm clouds, speaks in thunder, and throws lightning. He's said to appear during the pre-monsoon season. The peoples he's associated with, most commonly the Kulinsku, aren't really in the same cluster as the Wandjina, but are kind of close. It's kind of like northwest versus north. But the Wandjina are associated with thunderstorms, especially their eyes. So, that's kind of what we're going on here. And apparently the kind of pre-monsoon season in that part of Australia gets some pretty wicked lightning storms. It is said that because of this association with Mamaragan, or just with thunder as a concept, Wandjina also qualifies as a Lancer class. I can only assume, based on what JP has been doing, that this is related to Indra as the Grand Dual Lancer, semi-Grand Lancer type stuff. So, maybe Thunderbolts are Lancers. So, Wandjina appears in some cutscenes in a little bit in the climax of the Servant Summer Festival 25. Obviously, now it's getting a mainline event to debut in, so you'll get more story stuff there. Actually, we'll get to, speak to people, so that'll be good. If we get more foreigner story stuff, they might queue in for that for a bit to kind of explain. Again, talking about, like, dialogue cues, Wandjina relates to other foreigners by saying we're of the same class, but are a different sort of thing. I think Wandjina is kind of a foreigner in the same way that Voyager is. Anyway, transition to mechanics. And so, on to mechanics. Wandjina is an SSR 5-star foreigner, leaning more towards attack than HP, but not to either extreme. Not the biggest in attack, but not the smallest in HP, sort of a thing. Deck is Quick, Arts, Buster, fairly average hits, strong NP gain to compensate for the 1 Arts card. It's, 0.75 in there, so it's pretty strong. Wandjina's Noble Phantasm is a single target quick. It gives you 1 turn of Pierce Invul first, and a 50% damage up to Threat Against Humanity, also for 1 turn, also first. It also deals additional damage with each Wrath of the Elemental stack, which is a maximum of 10. Common enough mechanic. These stacks, though, are really, really good at amplifying damage, so keep that in mind. The Overcharge effect is just NP damage up for 1 turn first, scaling, with Overcharge. All in all, pretty solid stuff. First skill is 10 to 20% quick and buster up on yourself for 3 turns, a 2-hit 3-turn evade, and also gives Wandjina Wrath stacks when attacking, or rather when making normal attacks. So, let me specify this. The stack lasts for 5 turns, the buff when attacking lasts for 3 turns. Got that? So you attack up to 3 turns, you get 5 turns of stacks. Got it? Good. Second skill is kind of a charisma variant, gives all party members 10 to 20% attack up and 20 to 30% crit up. Gives allies who specifically have the human attribute, 10 to 30% NP damage up for 3 turns, and also gives human allies an on-hit buff, where if they're hit with an attack, they give Wandjina more Wrath stacks. Again, the on-hit buff lasts 3 turns, the Wrath stacks last for 5 turns. So you got 2 ways to generate stacks. Final skill is pretty straightforward. It's your mandated 20 to 30% battery. It's also 10% NP per turn for the whole party. and a 500 to 1000 heal per turn, both for 5 turns, so 50% battery, over the course of the skill's duration. Very, very solid stuff, though, again, not groundbreaking. Passives are Domain B, gives you a little bit of crit gen all the time and a little bit extra debuff resist. You have plenty of it anyway, though, because magic resistance A+. And then a unique passive, which gives 20% extra NP damage on aerospace fields specifically. Wandjina is pretty straightforward. They're a foreigner, they've got some extra damage steroids, they've got a pierce, they're meant to kill bosses. There are a decent number of ranked threats to humanity, especially bosses throughout Part 2, and some number of those might recur. It's usually space trees, but there's quite a few that can show up as guys you might fight in hunting quests or free quest farming or other shit as well, or even event stuff. Also, funnily enough, you can basically justify Wandjina pretty straightforwardly because it's very common on foreigner-class servants. Most of them have a threat to humanity trait, which, since foreigner is one of those classes that is weak to itself, you can pump damage that way. The way you use Wandjina is pretty simple. You pump damage steroids, you farm wrath stacks, you've got pretty solid longevity for bosses with the evasion and the healing options. You should be able to thug it out through quite a few fights. Now, I will say, team comp's going to be a little unusual here. So, obviously, Wandjina is quick focus. You got a quick NP, you got 2 quick cards, you got some quick buster buffs. You got a pretty singular intent. You're going to fire NP. But their secondary role here is support for the human attribute, which, if you're not careful, may cause a slight drop in your ceiling. The most famous quick supporters are usually Heaven or Earth attribute. You can still include Scotty, either Original Flavor or Summer Ice Cream, but that will mean you'll miss on one of the ways you can farm Wrath stacks, which are pretty important to turboing out Wandjina's damage. If you're just trying to turn and burn, like you're farming a free quest node that has like a single Berserker enemy in the middle of it, and you just want somebody who'll blow them up real good, Wandjina can do that for you with some quick steroids. But if you want to get the most out of Wandjina's kit, like specifically, consider a couple of off-support wave clearers. Funnily enough, Sakusui Shinsaku and Sen no Rikyu both give the team quick support. They have AoE NPs to kill ads, and are the human attribute, so you can get a little bit of synergy there. But like I said, you can just do a little bit of normal work. And obviously, Wandjina is better in a longer-term fight where you can take advantage of the NP per turn, healing per turn, use your evades, and farm Wrath stacks. So, again, if you're just turning and burning, and you just get some Scotties. Summer Scotty is great for this sort of thing. For craft essences, you have a couple of choices. If you want to go full throttle right away, you can do K-Scope, Imaginary Element, or its semi-replacement Winter Crystal. All those stuff work because you got 30% battery. If you want to drag things out, go all in. Heaven's Feel or Black Grail really punch up your NP while you're stalling out for stacks, give you something to do with that big damage. And if you're going somewhere in the middle, there's quite a few 50% charge CEs. I would say your critical area is going to be NP damage up and quick up, something like Cherry Icicle, One Summer, Crimson Teacher, Christmas is Past, stuff like that. There's plenty to pick from. Now we're going to talk about my famed other stuff. As a foreigner, Ascension should be pretty simple. It's mats only, no statues. It will require 10 Comet Shards and 10 Pomegranates, and this is sort of repeated for skills. You need 15 each of those. As probably Wandjina's most in-demand mats, the costume will require some Ether Photons, though, so be careful about that one. Now, I do want to warn you, Wandjina is a fairly rare servant. Other than the World Tour now, the only times Wandjina's had a raid-up is a lot of them at a couple years from now. Weekly Foreigner raid-up, secondary banner with the Intra event, and then Grand Duel Extra. So most of your chances are in those two years. It's now or much later. Of course, though, Wandjina being a limited SSR in the past few years is in most GSSR banners somewhere. And that'll be about it. I guess I should come up with some sort of planned outro slide anyway. But I hope everybody enjoys the Grand Tour. We're going to wrap up the video now. Let me know how you felt about my attempts to snazz things up a little. Put a couple extra transitions in here. Used a couple sound cues. See if you like that kind of thing. But if you want to be watching more, hey, make sure to subscribe to the channel to get more Wanted. Check out last week's episode of our podcast, weekly podcast, Let's Talk FGO, on this channel, where we did a little pregame, little preview of the event, anything you may need to know about fights and stuff and how long it'll take you, along with a few other fun things. We talk about FGO every week, along with other stuff going on. Make sure you're liking this video, you're commenting down below, you're hitting up our Discord. It has a roll thread if you want to post your roll results. I'll be throwing tickets, at least, for crime held on this banner. But in addition to all of that, consider ringing the bell, consider joining our channel memberships, and consider supporting us on Patreon. Well, a shout out to our highest level patrons. after the musical outro. Now tell me. Shout out to all our patrons, but especially to Adam DeHarp, Lexter G, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, Jadeway, 9000, Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Shrovor, and Varen the Crow. Thank you very much for your support. If you like we do want to see some more, consider supporting us on Patreon.